Well, we want to turn back to that breaking news now. Former President Donald Trump is hurt but safe after what appears to have been an assassination attempt at a rally in Pennsylvania today. An attendee is dead and 2 people are critically injured. The shooter also dead. This shooting is expected to have an impact on the presidential election, which is just under 4 months away. WWL Louisiana political analyst Clancy DuBos is here by phone now with more. Clancy, we have an election that's only months away now. What does this shooting mean for the political process going forward?
Well, I kind of agree with, I think it was what Senator Cassidy said earlier, that this is not the time to parse the politics of it. I think it's, at a minimum, it will make more people pay close attention to everything dealing with this election. I think it will also make people focus on one of the major issues that separate the 2 political parties, which is gun regulation. You know, the availability of guns, and also at the same time, it's not just about guns and availability of guns. The political rhetoric that's associated with our elections in recent years. This is not brand new to American politics, however. There have been a handful of presidential assassinations and a few more attempted assassinations. You know, Ronald Reagan was shot. Someone tried to shoot Gerald Ford as president, and there are probably many more attempts that were thwarted that are not reported to us for security reasons. But we live in a time when some people, thankfully a very small minority, but even that is too many, some people feel that violence is justified. It is never justified, as Congressman Scalise said earlier.
Yeah, and when you have someone who's willing to lose their life to take the life of someone else, it just shows you how brazen this all was, especially today here while the former president was trying to have a rally. Is there a concern that this will bolster the tension that was already present from both sides of this campaign?
Well, I think there's a lot of rhetoric on both sides, but I thought it was very important that President Biden not only made a statement, but I think he made the appropriate statement. He expressed a great deal of concern. He reached out to the former president, said he was going to speak to him or try to call him and speak to him to give him his words of encouragement and let him know that he's praying for him. And as I think it was, again, Senator Cassidy said, whether you like President Trump, former President Trump or not, you know, everybody should put him, if you're a kind of person who prays, everybody should pray for his well-being so that we can have our political process, we can have this presidential debate absent the ridiculously heated rhetoric, but more importantly, absent this kind of violence. We need to have a calm and peaceful transition of power, and we need to have a peaceful election leading up to that transition of power if there's going to be one. And, you know, this is something that all Americans need to think about when it comes to this election and the idea of, you know, some people thinking that violence is okay, that it's an acceptable means of resolving political differences or of asserting your own political beliefs.
Well, like you said, President Biden in his press conference after wondering how the former president was doing, he's mentioning, you know, denouncing political violence, and we're hearing a number of political figures doing that same thing. What messages do you think we can expect to hear from the voters and from other political leaders?
Well, I think people in both political parties are sounding exactly the right note. They're both expressing exactly the right message, and it's a shame that it took something like an attempt on the life of any presidential candidate, whether it's Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Robert Kennedy, or somebody else. It shouldn't take this to unite the country, but I think it has united the country in concern about political violence, and hopefully I think it will change the course, if it has any impact at all. I hope it changes the course of the use of inflammatory political rhetoric, because that's what inflames people to do stuff. And I'm not saying that the Democrats have inflamed this guy. Whoever this guy was, he was off on his own plane somewhere politically. But, you know, we've seen this from all sides. People have been threatened, and you've seen people talk about taking out presidential and congressional and Senate candidates, and it's just wrong on every level.
The president, people pouring out their support for the president today, people concerned, like you said, on both sides of this. You mentioned earlier that this is not the first time that someone has either assassinated or attempted to assassinate a president. When those things have occurred in the past, what did it do to just the temperature of the country when those things happened in the past?
Well, when they succeeded, it really, it's not so much the temperature, it cast a pall over the nation's mood. The last president to be assassinated was John F. Kennedy, but others have, someone attempted to assassinate Ronald Reagan and did in fact shoot him, and someone attempted to shoot Gerald Ford, and the gun misfired or didn't fire. But for that, President Ford would have been assassinated. And, it's just, it's the kind of thing that makes people stop and kind of do a gut check on themselves and think, maybe we're all taking this not necessarily too seriously, but we're taking it seriously in the wrong way. Right. And we need, the whole nation needs to have a gut check on this and just lower the temperature already. And let's get back to just, talking about issues that really matter and making reasoned decisions, and stop trying to point the finger at each other and do all. I'm going to go ahead and mention one guy, J.D. Vance, already said that it was the Democrats' rhetoric that caused this, which is ridiculous. The Democrats are not the ones with violent rhetoric. I'll just put it that way. And I'm not trying to say that anybody deserves this, because nobody does. Nobody does. Mm. But everybody needs to just take a deep breath and exhale slowly and focus on what really matters. And people should vote for who they want to vote for. And at a minimum, it's going to make people, I think, pay closer attention to this race. And if it, it shouldn't take something like this to make people pay close attention, but I think that will be one of the results of it.
Right. Do you anticipate to see any changes in the way that that these candidates campaign as we head into November?
I'm sorry, say that again,
Whitney? Do you anticipate any changes in the way that these candidates campaign into November?
That's impossible to say. Donald Trump is a bit of a loose cannon. I think even his supporters would say that. They like that about him. He's unpredictable. So I'm not going to hazard to make a prediction on Donald Trump. And Joe Biden's campaign has been, to put it lightly, it's been upside down, because after the debate. So right. It's very much in turmoil and in flux. You got people in his own party calling for him to step aside. So it's impossible for anybody to say with confidence how this campaign is going to unfold going forward.
Well, Clancy, thank you so much for taking the time to impart your knowledge and your expertise on this subject. It's something that we'll definitely be following. When we come back, we'll have more on this unfortunate incident.